The transport ship Meridian hummed through the void between star systems, carrying its mixed cargo of alien diplomats, traders, and one small human female who seemed utterly out of place among the towering Krillian warriors and heavily armored Vorthak merchants. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat quietly in the corner of the passenger lounge, her slight frame barely filling the chair designed for much larger beings. At barely 5 feet tall and weighing perhaps 100 pounds soaking wet, she looked like a strong breeze might knock her over. The other passengers gave her curious glances. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, having only made contact 15 years ago. Most species had heard stories about these strange primates from a backwater planet called Earth, but few had actually encountered one in person. Elena represented everything the galaxy expected from humans: small, fragile, and seemingly helpless without their technology. "Look at that tiny thing," rumbled Grex, a massive Krillian mercenary whose scales gleamed like polished obsidian. His kind stood 8 feet tall on average, with natural armor plating and strength that could crush steel. "How do humans even survive on their homeworld? She looks like she'd break if I breathed on her too hard." His companion, a four-armed Zenthari trader named Clix, chittered in agreement. "I heard they come from a death world, but looking at her, I find that hard to believe. Perhaps the stories are exaggerated. Their planet cannot be that dangerous if it produces such delicate creatures." Elena continued reading her tablet, seemingly oblivious to their conversation. She wore simple civilian clothes, a plain gray jumpsuit that hung loosely on her small frame, soft-soled shoes that made no sound when she walked, and no visible weapons or armor of any kind. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes remained focused on her reading material. Everything about her screamed, "Harmless civilian." Captain Thorne, a grizzled Altarian with cybernetic implants covering half his scarred face, watched the exchange from across the lounge. His species had a reputation for being excellent judges of character, and something about the human female nagged at him. There was a stillness to her that reminded him of predators he'd encountered in his decades of military service. The way she held herself, the casual awareness of her surroundings despite appearing absorbed in her reading. It didn't match her appearance. "Attention passengers," came the ship's automated announcement. "We will be making an unscheduled stop at Nexus Station for emergency repairs. Estimated delay is 6 hours." Elena looked up from her tablet for the first time since boarding. Her eyes briefly swept the lounge, taking in each passenger's location and position before returning to her reading. The movement was so quick and subtle that only Captain Thorne noticed it. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on her, analyzing micro-expressions and body language. Whatever his sensors told him made him frown deeply. As the ship docked at Nexus Station, most passengers chose to stretch their legs on the station's commercial deck. Elena remained seated, apparently content to continue reading. The lounge gradually emptied until only she and a few others remained. That's when the trouble started. 3 figures entered the lounge, Bloodclaw pirates judging by their crude armor and mismatched weapons. Nexus Station had a reputation for being a haven for criminals and smugglers, but pirates rarely boarded passenger vessels while docked. Their presence could only mean one thing: this wasn't a random robbery. "Well, well," snarled the lead pirate, a scarred Krillian even larger than Grex. "Look what we have here. A nice quiet place to conduct some business." His yellow eyes swept the room, cataloging the remaining passengers. "We're looking for someone. A human female traveling under the name Elena Vasquez." Elena's fingers stopped turning the pages of her tablet, though she didn't look up. The other passengers instinctively moved away from her, recognizing that whatever these pirates wanted with the human, they didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. "There she is," hissed the second pirate, pointing a clawed finger at Elena. "Smaller than I expected. This is going to be easy money." The third pirate, a cybernetically enhanced Vorthak, stepped forward. "Elena Vasquez, you're coming with us. The Syndicate has questions about what happened on Kepler Station. You can come quietly, or we can drag your broken body back to them. Your choice." Elena slowly closed her tablet and set it aside. When she finally looked up, her expression was calm, almost serene. "I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I can't do that. I have a very important meeting to attend on Proxima Prime, and I can't afford any delays." The pirates laughed. The sound was harsh and grating, full of anticipated violence. "You hear that, boys? The little human thinks she has a choice in the matter. The lead pirate drew his plasma rifle, a weapon capable of cutting through ship's hull plating. Last chance, meet. Come with us or we take you in pieces. Elena stood up slowly, smoothing down her jumpsuit. At her full height, she barely reached the shortest pirate's chest. You know, she said conversationally, everyone always makes the same mistake about humans. They see our size, our apparent fragility, and they assume we're weak. She rolled her shoulders, a casual gesture that somehow seemed to change everything about her posture. They forget that Earth didn't make us fragile. It made us adaptable. Enough talk, growled the lead pirate, raising his weapon. Stun her and let's go. What happened next would be talked about in the darker corners of Nexus Station for years to come. Elena moved, but calling it movement was like calling a supernova a light bulb. One moment she was standing 5 feet away from the nearest pirate, and the next she was inside his guard, her small fist driving upward into the nerve cluster below his jaw with surgical precision. The massive Krillian's eyes rolled back as his nervous system overloaded, and he collapsed like a felled tree. The second pirate barely had time to register what had happened before Elena was already moving again. She spun low, sweeping his legs while simultaneously grabbing his weapon arm and redirecting his plasma rifle's muzzle toward the ceiling. The burst of energy that erupted from the weapon carved a molten gash in the bulkhead as the pirate crashed to the floor. Elena's follow-up strike to his temple ensured he wouldn't be getting back up anytime soon. The cybernetic Vorthak was faster than his companions, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to track Elena's movements. He brought his own weapon to bear, finger tightening on the trigger. Elena tilted her head slightly, as if she were listening to music only she could hear, then moved in a way that seemed to defy physics. The energy blast meant for her center mass passed harmlessly through empty air as she flowed around it like water, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Her hand struck his weapon arm with enough force to crack the cybernetic reinforcement, sending the rifle skittering across the floor. Before he could react, she had moved behind him, one arm around his neck in a chokehold that targeted specific pressure points. The Vorthak struggled briefly, his enhanced strength useless against her precise technique, before joining his unconscious companions on the floor. The entire fight had lasted less than 30 seconds. Elena straightened her jumpsuit, picked up her tablet, and returned to her seat as if nothing had happened. Captain Thorne, who had witnessed the entire encounter from the doorway, could only stare in stunned silence. Captain, Elena said without looking up from her reading, you might want to call station security. These gentlemen seem to have had an accident. Captain Thorne stood frozen in the doorway for several long moments, his cybernetic eye still recording and analyzing what he had just witnessed. 3 seasoned pirates, all of them larger and more heavily armed than the small human, lay unconscious on the deck. Elena sat peacefully reading, her tablet as if she had simply watched a mildly interesting documentary rather than single-handedly dismantled 3 dangerous criminals. Station security is on their way, he finally managed, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Dr. Vasquez, I think we need to talk. Elena looked up with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the entire encounter. Of course, Captain. Though I should mention that I'm not actually a doctor. That's just part of my cover identity for this mission. Mission? Thorne's scarred face hardened. What kind of mission requires someone to pretend to be a civilian academic while traveling on my ship? Before Elena could respond, station security burst into the lounge. 6 heavily armed guards in powered armor spread out tactically, their weapons trained on the scene. The lead officer, a Zenthari with sergeant's stripes, surveyed the unconscious pirates with professional interest. We received reports of weapons fire, the sergeant announced. What happened here? 3 pirates attempted to kidnap one of my passengers, Captain Thorne replied, gesturing toward Elena. She defended herself. The security sergeant's mandibles clicked in what might have been skepticism as he looked at the tiny human female. She did this? To 3 Bloodclaw pirates? I'm as surprised as you are, Thorne admitted. The whole thing lasted maybe 30 seconds. Elena closed her tablet and stood, smoothing down her jumpsuit again. Officers, you'll find these individuals are wanted on multiple worlds for kidnapping, murder, and trafficking in sentient beings. Their ship is likely docked somewhere on this station, and I suspect you'll find evidence of their crimes aboard it. The sergeant's 4 eyes focused on her with renewed interest. How do you know so much about their activities, human? Because hunting people like them is my job, Elena replied matter-of-factly. My name is Elena Vasquez, and I work for a joint human galactic task force dedicated to combating organized crime. These three have been on our watch list for months. Captain Thorne felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. You're not a civilian at all, are you? You're some kind of law enforcement officer. Something like that, Elena confirmed, though my exact title is a bit more complicated. Let's just say that when the galaxy has problems that regular law enforcement can't handle, they call people like me. The security sergeant was scanning the unconscious pirates with a handheld device. These readings are unusual. No signs of energy weapon discharge, no chemical traces of stunning agents. How exactly did you subdue them? Elena tilted her head slightly, considering her response. Human combat techniques tend to focus on precision rather than brute force. We've learned to target nerve clusters, pressure points, and structural weaknesses that most species overlook. When you're naturally smaller and weaker than almost every potential opponent, you adapt accordingly. But the speed, Thorne protested. I've seen enhanced soldiers move fast, but what you did was impossible. No unaugmented being should be able to move like that. A small smile played at the corners of Elena's mouth. Captain, what do you know about human evolution? Basic stuff, he replied. You evolved from hunting animals on a death world, developed tool use, eventually achieved spaceflight. Standard evolutionary progression. That's the simplified version, Elena said, but it leaves out some important details. Earth didn't just produce one successful human subspecies. Over millions of years, different environments created different adaptations. Most humans are what you might call generalists, reasonably good at many things but not exceptional at any one thing. But some bloodlines developed more specialized traits. The security sergeant had finished securing the pirates and was listening with obvious interest. What kind of specializations? Enhanced reflexes, improved spatial awareness, superior pattern recognition, increased muscle fiber density despite smaller overall muscle mass, Elena explained. Traits that were useful for our ancestors who hunted the apex predators of Earth. Most of these genetic variations were lost or diluted over time as humans became more civilized, but some families maintained the bloodlines. Captain Thorne's cybernetic eye whirred as it processed this information. You're saying you're genetically enhanced? Not enhanced, Elena corrected. Naturally selected. My family line traces back to groups of humans who specialized in hunting the most dangerous predators on Earth. When humanity joined the galactic community and discovered that the galaxy had its own apex predators, sentient ones that prey on other species, well, my particular skill set became relevant again. The sergeant clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. So you're telling me that humans deliberately sent their most dangerous individuals out into the galaxy? Only the ones who volunteered, Elena said with a slight smile. And only for law enforcement purposes. The Galactic Council was having trouble with certain criminal organizations that conventional forces couldn't handle. Pirates, slavers, assassins. Beings who were too fast, too strong, or too clever for normal security forces. They needed specialists. And you're one of these specialists, Thorne said. It wasn't a question. I'm one of 12 currently active, Elena confirmed. We work alone or in small teams, usually undercover. Our job is to neutralize threats that pose a danger to galactic stability and civilian populations. The security sergeant was reviewing data on his scanner. These pirates you just subdued are part of the Crimson Syndicate. They've been responsible for over 40 kidnappings in this sector alone. Regular forces have been hunting them for 2 years without success. I know, Elena replied. I've been tracking them for 6 months. They made the mistake of targeting a human colony ship last month. That's when it became personal. Personal how? Thorne asked. Elena's calm demeanor flickered for just a moment, revealing something harder underneath. They took children, Captain. Human children and several young aliens from other species. Some were recovered, but not all. The ones we didn't find. She trailed off, then continued with forced calmness. The Syndicate has a particular market for young slaves. They're very profitable. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Even the security officers shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the cold fury that had briefly flashed in the human's eyes. So this wasn't a random encounter, Thorne realized. You were hunting them. The intelligence suggested they would try to intercept me on this route, Elena confirmed. My cover identity as a civilian academic was designed to make me look like an easy target. The plan was to let them capture me and lead me back to their base of operations. That's insane, the sergeant protested. You were going to let yourself be kidnapped by some of the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy? Elena shrugged. It seemed like the most efficient approach. Unfortunately, they decided to try the direct approach instead of waiting for a better opportunity. Now I'll have to track down their base the hard way. Captain Thorne shook his head in amazement. And here I thought you were just another fragile human who had wandered too far from home. That's the idea, Elena said. Most species in the galaxy are stronger, faster, and tougher than humans. They expect us to be helpless without our technology. It's an advantage we've learned to exploit. By looking weak and harmless, the sergeant said, understanding dawning in his voice. Exactly. No one expects a threat from something that appears defenseless. It's a form of camouflage that served my species well, both on Earth and out here among the stars. Elena picked up her tablet and checked the time. Captain, when will the repairs be completed? I still have that meeting on Proxima Prime, and it really is quite important. Another mission? Thorne asked. Something like that, Elena replied with another small smile. Let's just say that the Syndicate isn't the only criminal organization that's been causing problems lately. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Captain. Fortunately for the law-abiding citizens, humans are very good at being dangerous right back. As the security team hauled away the unconscious pirates, Captain Thorne found himself looking at his small passenger with entirely new eyes. The fragile-looking human who had boarded his ship was revealed to be one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, and the scariest part was that she made it look effortless. 3 days later, the Meridian approached Proxima Prime, a bustling trade hub that served as the unofficial capital of the Outer Rim territories. Captain Thorne had spent most of the journey observing Elena, trying to reconcile the quiet, seemingly helpless woman with the lethal operative he had witnessed in action. She continued to maintain her cover perfectly, spending her time reading, occasionally chatting politely with other passengers, and appearing for all the world like an ordinary civilian academic. Only Thorne's trained eye could now spot the subtle signs he had missed before. The way she always chose seats with clear views of all entrances and exits, how she seemed to know the location of every other passenger without obviously watching them, the casual way she tested the structural integrity of objects around her, as if automatically cataloging potential weapons. Once you knew what to look for, Elena Vasquez was about as subtle as a plasma cannon. Approaching Proxima Prime Orbital Dock 7, announced the ship's navigation officer. All passengers prepare for docking procedures. Elena gathered her few belongings and moved toward the airlock with the other disembarking passengers. As she passed Captain Thorne, she paused and offered him a slight smile. Thank you for the comfortable journey, Captain. I hope the rest of your voyage is pleasantly uneventful. Dr. Vasquez, Thorne said quietly. Or whoever you really are, be careful down there. Proxima Prime isn't known for being particularly safe, even for armed security forces. I appreciate the concern, Elena replied. But honestly, Captain, after growing up on Earth, most places seem relatively safe. She joined the line of passengers moving through the airlock, once again appearing to be nothing more than a small, vulnerable human among the much larger alien beings surrounding her. Thorne watched until she disappeared into the station's crowds, then returned to his duties with a nagging feeling that he had just witnessed something significant. Elena made her way through Proxima Prime's labyrinthine commercial districts, following memorized directions toward her actual destination. The station was a sprawling metropolis in space, home to over 12 million beings from hundreds of different species. It was also a notorious haven for smugglers, black market dealers, and various other criminal enterprises that thrived in the poorly regulated Outer Rim. Her target was a nightclub called the Nebula's Edge, located in one of the station's seedier districts. According to intelligence reports, it served as a front for the Vanth Cartel, an organization that specialized in weapons trafficking and contract assassination. More importantly, they had recently acquired a shipment of military-grade neural disruptors, weapons capable of permanently scrambling the brain patterns of any sentient being. The Galactic Council wanted those weapons recovered before they could be sold to the highest bidder. The club's exterior was deliberately intimidating, with armored guards stationed at the entrance and energy barriers that scanned each patron for weapons and recording devices. Elena approached the checkpoint with the same casual confidence she had displayed throughout her journey, her civilian identification ready for inspection. Purpose of visit? Growled the Krillian bouncer. his scanner indicating that Elena was carrying no detectable weapons or surveillance equipment. "I'm meeting a friend for drinks," Elena replied pleasantly. Dr. Marcus Chen said he would be here around 8 o'clock. The bouncer checked his list and nodded. Dr. Chen was indeed expected. He was one of Elena's carefully constructed cover identities, backed by falsified records that would hold up to casual scrutiny. The bouncer waved her through and Elena entered the club's main floor. The Nebula's Edge was designed to cater to the diverse physiologies of its alien clientele. Multiple gravity zones accommodated species from different worlds. Atmospheric processors provided breathable air for various respiratory systems, and the lighting could be adjusted for beings with different visual spectrums. It was also loud, crowded, and chaotic. Perfect conditions for conducting illegal business. Without attracting unwanted attention, Elena made her way to the bar and ordered a mild alcoholic beverage that would help maintain her cover while keeping her reflexes sharp. As she waited, she used the mirror behind the bar to observe the club's layout and identify potential threats. The main floor was mostly legitimate patrons, but she spotted several individuals whose body language and positioning marked them as security personnel. More importantly, she noticed a discreet staircase leading to an upper level that was clearly off limits to regular customers. "Excuse me," said a voice behind her. Elena turned to find a well-dressed Altarian with cybernetic implants around his eyes, modifications that would allow him to see across multiple spectrums and detect hidden weapons or devices. "Are you Dr. Sarah Vasquez?" Elena nodded, maintaining her cover identity. "Yes, though I'm actually waiting for Dr. Chen. Are you a friend of his?" "In a manner of speaking," the Altarian replied smoothly. "My name is Corvin, and I represent certain business interests that Dr. Chen has expressed interest in. He asked me to escort you to our private meeting room." This was clearly not part of the original plan, but Elena had expected some variation from the initial intelligence. She followed Corvin through the crowd, noting how other patrons seemed to instinctively move out of their way. Whatever Corvin's actual position in the organization, he was clearly someone of importance. They climbed the discreet staircase to the upper level, which was much quieter and more luxurious than the main floor. Corvin led her down a hallway lined with private meeting rooms, each one soundproofed and electronically shielded to prevent eavesdropping. He stopped at a door marked with alien symbols and gestured for her to enter. The room beyond was spacious and elegantly appointed, with furniture designed to accommodate multiple species. Seated around a central table were 5 beings that Elena immediately recognized as high-ranking members of the Vanth cartel. At the head of the table sat Vex Vanth himself, a Zenthari crime lord whose forearms were covered in ritual scarification that marked his kills. "Dr. Vasquez," Vex said, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. "How good of you to join us. Please have a seat." Elena maintained her confused academic persona, looking around the room with apparent nervousness. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some mistake. I'm supposed to be meeting Dr. Chen about a research collaboration." "Who are you people?" "Oh, we know exactly who you are," Vex replied. "The question is whether you know who we are. You see, Dr. Vasquez, we've done some research of our own into your background. Very thorough research." Elena felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her expression confused and innocent. "I don't understand. I'm just a xenobiology researcher from the University of New Geneva. I'm here to discuss a joint study of Proxima System wildlife." One of the other cartel members, a heavily augmented Vorthak, activated a holographic display that showed Elena's false credentials. "These are very good forgeries," he rumbled. "Whoever created them knows their craft, but we have contacts in the University of New Geneva, and they've never heard of you." "That's impossible," Elena protested, putting just the right amount of indignation into her voice. "I've been working there for 3 years. What we find most interesting," Vex continued, "is that someone has gone to considerable trouble to create a false identity for you. The kind of trouble that suggests you're far more important than you appear. Now, normally when someone infiltrates our operations under false pretenses, we simply eliminate them. But you present an interesting puzzle." Corvin moved to block the room's only exit, his cybernetic eyes glowing as they focused on Elena. "You see, our sources tell us that a human operative has been systematically dismantling criminal organizations throughout this sector. Someone with unusual capabilities and a talent for appearing harmless. Someone exactly like you. Elena realized that her cover had been blown more thoroughly than she had anticipated. The Vanth cartel was clearly better informed than intelligence had suggested. She continued to maintain her confused academic act, but she was already calculating distances and angles, identifying weapons and weaknesses, preparing for the moment when subtlety would no longer be an option. "I really don't know what you're talking about," she said, allowing a slight tremor to enter her voice. "Can I please just leave? I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." Vex's mandibles clicked again, and this time Elena was certain it was laughter. "Oh, my dear Dr. Vasquez, I'm afraid leaving is no longer an option. You see, we've decided to test a theory. If you really are just an innocent academic, then what happens next will be regrettable but necessary. But if you're the operative we think you are," he gestured to Corvin, who drew a military-grade plasma pistol and aimed it directly at Elena's head, "then this should be very interesting indeed." Elena stared down the barrel of Corvin's plasma pistol, her mind racing through tactical assessments. The room contained 6 hostiles, all of them experienced criminals with cybernetic enhancements that would make them faster and stronger than baseline members of their species. The furniture was heavy enough to provide temporary cover, but wouldn't stop plasma fire for long. The walls were reinforced and soundproofed, meaning no one outside would hear what happened next. "You know," she said conversationally, still maintaining her frightened academic persona, "I've always wondered about something. If I really were this dangerous operative you think I am, wouldn't it be rather foolish to trap me in a small room with limited exits?" Vex's scarred mandibles clicked with amusement. "An interesting point, Dr. Vasquez. But you see, we've taken precautions. This room is equipped with neural dampening fields that interfere with enhanced reflexes and coordination. Even if you were augmented, which our scans suggest you're not, you would be operating at perhaps 60% of normal capacity." 60%, Elena mused, as if considering an academic problem. That does seem like a significant disadvantage. She paused, tilting her head slightly. "Of course, it assumes that normal human capacity is something you understand correctly." Corvin's finger tightened on the trigger. "Enough games. If you're just a civilian, prove it. Show us the fear we should be seeing. Beg for your life like any normal person would." Elena looked around the room one more time, her gaze lingering on each cartel member's position and equipment. When she spoke, her voice had lost all trace of the nervous academic persona she had been maintaining. "I'm afraid I can't do that," she said calmly. "You see, you made one critical error in your analysis. You assumed that being human means being weak. What happened next defied everything the cartel members thought they knew about human limitations." Elena moved with a fluid grace that seemed to bend the laws of physics, her small frame becoming a blur of controlled violence. The neural dampening field that was supposed to slow her reflexes might as well have been a gentle breeze for all the effect it had. She rolled backward off her chair just as Corvin fired, the plasma bolt searing through the air where her head had been a split second before. Before he could adjust his aim, Elena had grabbed the chair she had been sitting in and hurled it across the room with enough force to crush his cybernetic arm against the wall. His weapon clattered to the floor as he screamed in pain. The Vorthak enforcer to her left drew a vibroblade and lunged forward, his enhanced muscles driving the weapon toward Elena's midsection, with enough force to cut through battle armor. Elena flowed around the attack like water, catching his wrist and using his own momentum to drive him face first into the conference table. The impact cracked both the table and his reinforced skull. Vex was shouting orders in his native language, but Elena was already moving again. A second Zenthari had produced a neural disruptor, one of the very weapons she had come to recover, and was trying to target her with its area effect beam. Elena dove behind an overturned chair just as the weapon discharged, the neural energy crackling harmlessly over her head. "Impossible," Vex snarled. "Nothing moves that fast without technological enhancement." Elena popped up from behind her makeshift cover, having somehow acquired Corvin's dropped plasma pistol during her evasive maneuver. "You really should have done more research on human evolutionary history," she said, putting 2 precise shots into the neural disruptor wielder's center mass. "We didn't survive on Earth by being slow." The remaining 3 cartel members opened fire simultaneously, their weapons turning the conference room into a storm of energy bolts and projectiles. Elena seemed to dance between the deadly beams, her movement so fluid and unpredictable that their targeting systems couldn't track her effectively. She used the room's furnishings as stepping stones and shields, never staying in one position long enough for them to get a solid lock on her. "The dampening field isn't working," shouted one of the gunmen, a cybernetically enhanced Krillian whose scales glowed with heat dispersal modifications. "She's not even slowing down." "That's because you built it to counter cybernetic and chemical enhancements," Elena replied, her voice remarkably calm for someone dodging lethal fire. "You never considered that some species might have natural capabilities that exceed your expectations." She vaulted over the conference table, using its surface to launch herself at the Krillian gunman. Her feet struck his weapon arm with enough force to snap the reinforced bones, while her momentum carried her past him in a graceful spin that ended with her elbow striking the base of his skull. He toppled like a felled tree, his enhanced nervous system overwhelmed by the precisely targeted blow. The last enforcer, a four-armed Altarian with extensive combat modifications, had enough sense to stop shooting and try to engage Elena in close combat, where his superior reach and multiple limbs might give him an advantage. It was a reasonable tactical decision that failed completely when it met the reality of human adaptability. Elena fought like nothing he had ever encountered. Where his species relied on overwhelming firepower and technical superiority, she used misdirection, leverage, and an intimate understanding of anatomy that allowed her to target vulnerabilities he didn't even know he had. His forearms meant nothing when she could predict where each one would be, and flow around them like smoke. His cybernetic reflexes were useless when she could read his body language and react to his intentions before he fully formed them. The fight ended when Elena managed to get inside his guard and drive her palm into a nerve cluster at the base of his neck. The Altarian's enhanced muscles locked up as his nervous system overloaded, and he collapsed in a twitching heap. Vex found himself alone in a room with 5 unconscious enforcers and one small human female who wasn't even breathing hard. Elena calmly picked up one of the fallen neural disruptors and examined it with professional interest. "Fascinating technology," she said conversationally. "I can see why the Council was concerned about these falling into the wrong hands. The neural pathway disruption is quite elegant, though I suspect it would be less effective against humans than other species." "What are you?" Vex whispered, his mandibles clicking with fear rather than amusement. Elena looked up from the weapon with a slight smile. "I'm exactly what I said I was, Vex. I'm human. The problem is that your species, most species, actually, have a very limited understanding of what that means." She moved closer to the crime lord, who pressed himself back against the wall despite his size advantage. "You see, most galactic species evolved on worlds that were relatively stable and predictable. Your ancestors faced challenges, certainly, but they were specific challenges that could be overcome with specific adaptations. Stronger muscles, better armor, enhanced senses, straightforward solutions to straightforward problems. Earth was different," she continued, casually disarming the neural disruptor and pocketing its power cell. "Our world threw everything at us. Predators that could outrun us, climate changes that could freeze or cook us, diseases that could kill us in days, natural disasters that could reshape entire continents. We couldn't outmuscle a saber-toothed tiger or outarmor a volcanic eruption. So we learned to adapt," Elena said, her voice taking on an almost lecturing tone. "Not with one specific trait, but with the ability to learn, improvise, and overcome whatever challenge we faced. We became the ultimate generalists, capable of thriving in any environment and defeating any enemy, not through superiority in any one area, but through our ability to find creative solutions to impossible problems." Vex's 4 eyes darted toward the room's exit, but Elena shook her head. "I wouldn't recommend it. I still need to ask you some questions about your supply chains and distribution networks. The Council is very interested in making sure no more of these weapons make it to market." "You're insane," Vex protested. "My organization has over 1,000 members across dozens of worlds. You can't fight all of us." Elena's smile widened slightly. "You're absolutely right. I can't fight 1,000 criminals across dozens of worlds." She paused, pulling out a small communication device. "Fortunately, I don't have to." The device chimed softly as she activated it. "Control, this is Operative 7. Package secured, primary target neutralized. Request immediate extraction and cleanup crew for 6 hostiles." "Copy that, 7. Came a crisp reply through the communicator. "Extraction team is standing by. Local authorities have been notified and are moving to secure the building." Vex's mandibles clicked in confusion. Local authorities? Proxima Prime Security is completely corrupt. Half of them are on my payroll. Not Proxima Prime Security, Elena said pleasantly. Galactic Council Peace Enforcement Division. They've been conducting a joint operation with human specialists to clean up the Outer Rim territories. Your organization was designated a priority target 6 months ago. The sound of heavy boots echoed from the hallway outside, followed by the distinctive whine of military-grade energy weapons powering up. Elena moved to the door and activated the release mechanism, stepping aside as a squad of armored peacekeepers entered the room. Situation report, Operative 7? Asked the squad leader, a professional-looking Centaurian whose armor bore the insignia of a peace enforcement commander. 2 weeks after the Proxima Prime operation, Elena found herself aboard another transport vessel, this time bound for the remote mining colony of Kepler 442b. Her official identity was Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a geological consultant hired to assess mineral extraction efficiency. Her real mission was far more personal and dangerous than anything the Galactic Council had officially sanctioned. The Crimson Syndicate's remaining leadership had gone to ground after the destruction of the Vanth cartel, but Elena's investigation had revealed something that made her blood run cold. The missing children from the human colony ship attack weren't dead. They were being held at a secret facility on Kepler 442b, along with young victims from at least 6 other species. The facility was reportedly a training center, where children were conditioned to become perfect slaves, their personalities systematically broken down and rebuilt according to their future owners' specifications. Elena stared out the transport's viewport at the approaching planet, a barren world of red rocks and toxic atmosphere, where mining corporations extracted rare metals under brutal conditions. It was the perfect place to hide an illegal operation, isolated, dangerous, and populated by people who minded their own business and asked no questions. Her fellow passengers were typical for this route: gruff miners returning from leave, corporate supervisors, and a few traders looking to make deals in the outer settlements. None of them paid any attention to the quiet human woman reading geological surveys in the corner, which was exactly what Elena wanted. Dr. Mitchell? A gravelly voice interrupted her reading. Elena looked up to see a massive Krillian in mining coveralls approaching her seat. His scales were stained with industrial chemicals, and his cybernetic arm whirred softly as he moved. Name's Korak. Heard you're coming to assess our operations. Elena smiled pleasantly. That's right. I specialize in optimizing extraction efficiency in hostile environments. Your operations manager requested a consultation. Korak's yellow eyes narrowed slightly. Funny thing about that. Been working the mines on Kepler for 15 years, and this is the first time corporate has brought in an outside consultant, especially not one who looks like a stiff breeze would knock her over. Several other miners had gathered around, forming a loose circle that could appear casual to observers but effectively trapped Elena in her seat. Elena continued smiling, but her muscles tensed as she recognized the shift in atmosphere. Maybe you're not really here about mining, Korak continued. Maybe you're here poking around in business that doesn't concern you. We don't like people who poke around in our business. Elena set aside her tablet and looked up at the scarred Krillian. Mr. Korak, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. I'm simply a geological consultant doing a job I was hired to do. Are you now? Another voice joined the conversation. Elena turned to see a human man approaching. Tall, heavily muscled, with the kind of scars that came from years of violence rather than industrial accidents. Because word has gotten around that someone's been asking questions about certain operations on Kepler. Operations that people like us get paid very well to keep quiet about. Elena's heart rate remained steady, but her mind shifted into combat mode. The presence of a human among what were clearly syndicate operatives suggested this confrontation was more than coincidental. Someone had identified her despite her cover, which meant her mission was compromised before it had even begun. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, she said calmly. Perhaps you could clarify what operations you're referring to. The human man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, Elena Vasquez. Or should I say, Operative 7. The circle of miners tightened slightly, and Elena noticed that several of them had moved their hands closer to concealed weapons. The transport's other passengers were pointedly looking elsewhere, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. You have me confused with someone else, Elena replied, maintaining her confused academic persona, even though it was clearly futile. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I work for Stellar Geological Services. Sarah Mitchell died in a speeder accident 3 months ago, the human said. Someone's been using her identity, though. Someone who looks remarkably like the operative who's been systematically destroying criminal organizations throughout this sector. Korak cracked his knuckles, the sound like breaking rocks. The boss wants to have a conversation with you, lady. You can come quietly or we can drag you. Either way, you're coming with us when we reach Kepler. Elena looked around the circle of hostile faces and sighed softly. You know, this is becoming a disturbingly common occurrence. Does everyone in this sector have such poor impulse control? What's that supposed to mean? Demanded one of the other miners. I mean, Elena said, standing up slowly, that you're all making the same mistake that everyone else has made. You see a small human woman and you assume that numerical superiority and superior size give you an insurmountable advantage. Because it does. Korak rumbled. You're outnumbered 8-1 and each of us outweighs you by at least 60 pounds. Enhanced reflexes or not, you can't fight all of us in a confined space. Elena tilted her head thoughtfully. You know what's interesting about transport ships? They're designed to be as light as possible, while still maintaining structural integrity. That means they use a lot of lightweight composite materials that look strong, but can be surprisingly fragile if you know where to apply pressure. What are you babbling about? The human operative demanded. Instead of answering, Elena suddenly drove her fist into the bulkhead beside her seat. The composite panel cracked with a sharp report, and emergency warnings began sounding as the ship's atmosphere monitoring system detected a potential hull breach. Attention passengers, came the ship's automated announcement. Minor structural damage detected in passenger. Compartment C. Please remain calm while emergency protocols are initiated. The miners looked around nervously as emergency lighting activated and the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated slightly. In the confusion, Elena moved with the same impossible speed she had displayed on Proxima Prime. Her hand found the emergency fire suppression release, flooding the compartment with sound-dampening foam that reduced visibility to almost zero. What followed was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Elena moved through the white foam like a ghost, using the miners' confusion and the reduced visibility to isolate and neutralize them one by one. Her knowledge of different species' anatomies allowed her to target specific nerve clusters and pressure points that would incapacitate without permanent damage. The first miner went down when Elena struck a cluster of nerves behind his knee that caused his leg to collapse. The second found himself unconscious after a precisely applied chokehold that cut off blood flow to his brain for exactly the right amount of time. The third tried to grab her and instead found his arm twisted in a direction it wasn't designed to bend. Where is she? Shouted Korak, swinging his cybernetic arm blindly through the foam. I can't see anything. She's just a human, the human operative called back. She can't have gone far. Elena's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. You know what your real problem is? You're thinking like predators instead of thinking like prey. Humans spent millions of years as prey animals before we learned to hunt. We know how to hide, how to strike from concealment, how to turn our enemies' advantages against them. A scream echoed through the foam as another miner discovered that his weapon had been turned against him. Elena had somehow managed to disarm him and use his own neural disruptor to stun him into unconsciousness. This is impossible, Korak roared, his cybernetic sensors unable to lock onto Elena's position through the suppression foam. Nothing moves that fast. Speed isn't the advantage you think it is, Elena's disembodied voice replied. When you're fast but predictable, a smart opponent can anticipate your movements and be waiting where you're going to be. Humans learn to be unpredictable first, fast second. The human operative tried a different approach, activating a broad-spectrum scanner that should have revealed Elena's position, regardless of visual obstacles. Instead, he found himself grabbed from behind, his scanner crushed in Elena's grip before she applied a sleeper hold that dropped him to the deck. Within 3 minutes, all 8 attackers were unconscious or incapacitated, and Elena stood alone in the slowly clearing foam. She calmly returned to her seat and picked up her tablet, resuming her reading as if nothing had happened. When the ship's security team arrived to investigate the disturbance, they found 8 miners apparently overcome by the emergency suppression system, and 1 small human woman who claimed to have hidden under her seat until the danger passed. Terrible accident, Elena told the security chief with wide, innocent eyes. I think they were fighting about something and accidentally triggered the emergency systems. I was so frightened I just hid until it was over. The security chief looked around at the unconscious forms scattered throughout the compartment and shook his head. Transport regulations clearly state that passengers should remain seated during emergency situations. These individuals will be confined to holding cells for the remainder of the journey. The mining complex on Kepler 442b sprawled across a vast plateau of red stone, its industrial towers and extraction equipment reaching toward the poison-yellow sky like metallic trees. Elena observed the facility from a rocky outcropping 2 kilometers away, using military-grade optics to study the layout and security arrangements. The official mining operations were exactly what they appeared to be: a legitimate corporate extraction facility pulling rare metals from the planet's harsh crust. The secret facility was harder to spot, but Elena's trained eye picked out the subtle signs: extra power conduits leading to a seemingly empty section of the complex, guard rotations that included areas with no apparent industrial purpose. Most tellingly, a landing pad designed for small, fast ships rather than the massive cargo haulers that serviced the mining operation. Elena had spent 3 days infiltrating the mining camp's workforce, using her geological consultant cover to gain access to technical diagrams and personnel records. What she had learned made her jaw clench with controlled fury. The syndicate's operation was even worse than intelligence had suggested. They weren't just conditioning children to be slaves, they were experimenting on them, testing the limits of different species' psychological resistance, and documenting the most effective methods of mental conditioning. The facility held 43 children ranging in age from 6 to 15, representing 12 different species. Among them were the 7 human children taken from the colony ship, including a 10-year-old girl named Maria Santos, whose parents had died trying to protect her during the attack. Elena checked her equipment one final time. She carried minimal gear, a few specialized tools disguised as geological instruments, emergency medical supplies, and her own enhanced capabilities. The Galactic Council had offered to send a full military strike team, but Elena had declined. Military operations were loud, complicated, and risked harm to the hostages. This called for a more surgical approach. As the planet's sun set behind the toxic clouds, Elena began her approach to the facility. She moved like a shadow across the rocky terrain, her small size allowing her to use cover that would never hide larger beings. The facility's perimeter sensors were designed to detect vehicles and large groups, not a single person moving with the patient stealth of a human hunter. The outer fence was electrified and topped with neural disruptor wires, but Elena had come prepared. Using a device disguised as a mineral scanner, she created a brief electromagnetic pulse that disabled a small section of the barrier without triggering general alarms. She slipped through the gap and immediately moved toward the facility's power distribution center. The syndicate had made a classic mistake in their security planning. They had focused on preventing escape rather than infiltration, assuming that no one would be foolish enough to attack a heavily defended facility in the middle of a hostile wasteland. Their guards were positioned to watch the entrances and monitor the hostages, not to prevent someone from getting in. Elena reached the power station without encountering a single sentry. The facility's main power grid was a typical industrial setup, robust, reliable, and completely vulnerable to someone who understood how to overload specific circuits without triggering automatic shutdowns. Elena spent several minutes carefully modifying the power routing, setting up cascading failures that would disable security systems throughout the facility, while maintaining life support for the hostages. When she was satisfied with her preparations, Elena moved to the facility's communication array and planted a small device that would jam all outgoing transmissions when activated. The syndicate guards would find themselves cut off from reinforcements and unable to call for help. The next phase required more direct action. Elena approached the main facility through a maintenance tunnel that her stolen blueprints had revealed. The tunnel was supposed to be secured, but the syndicate had grown complacent after months of operating without interference. A single guard dozed at his post, apparently confident that no threat could possibly reach this deep into their stronghold. Elena moved past the sleeping guard like a whisper of wind, her footsteps making no sound on the metal flooring. She reached the facility's central hub just as her sabotaged power grid began its carefully orchestrated failure. Emergency lighting flickered on as main power died and security monitors went dark throughout the complex. "What the hell?" shouted a voice from the control room. "Why are we losing power?" "Checking the grid now," came a reply. "Looks like cascade failures in the main distribution center. Could be equipment fatigue or—" The voice was cut off as Elena's communication jammer activated, flooding the facility's internal networks with white noise. In the confusion that followed, she began her systematic assault on the Syndicate's operation. Elena had studied the facility's layout extensively, memorizing guard positions, patrol routes, and the location of every hostage. She moved through the complex like an avenging spirit, striking without warning and vanishing before her targets could react. Guards found themselves unconscious without ever seeing their attacker. Weapons disappeared from their holsters. Security doors locked or unlocked seemingly, at random as Elena used her hacking tools to turn the facility's own systems against its operators. The Syndicate's leader was a Vorthak named Grax who had earned his reputation through decades of systematic cruelty. Elena found him in the facility's command center, frantically trying to restore communications and coordinate a defense against an enemy he couldn't see or understand. "Report," he snarled into his communicator. "How many attackers are there? What kind of force are we facing?" Static was his only answer. Elena had systematically disabled every guard in the facility, leaving Grax alone with his hostages and his fears. She stepped into the command center like a shadow made solid, her presence announced only by the soft sound of the door sealing behind her. Grax spun around, his cybernetic implants glowing as they tried to focus on this new threat. What he saw defied his understanding of tactical situations. A small human female in mining coveralls, unarmed and apparently alone, had somehow penetrated his heavily defended facility and neutralized his entire security force. "Impossible," he whispered. "You're just one person, a human. How did you—" "Hello, Grax," Elena said calmly. "My name is Elena Vasquez and I'm here for the children." Grax's hand moved toward the weapon at his side, but Elena shook her head. "I wouldn't recommend that. You see, I've spent the last hour learning everything there is to know about your operation. I know where every child is being held. I know which guards have keys, and I know exactly how long it will take local authorities to respond to my signal." "You're bluffing," Grax snarled, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "Even if you somehow got past my guards, you're still just one small human. I could break you in half." Elena tilted her head thoughtfully. "You know, everyone says that. Right up until they try it." She took a step closer, and something in her movement made Grax instinctively back away. "The thing is, Grax, you've made this personal. Those children you've been experimenting on, some of them are human. They're my species, which makes them my responsibility. But it's not just about species loyalty," she continued, taking another step forward. "It's about something deeper than that. You see, humans have a particular hatred for beings who prey on children. It's hardwired into our psychology, a survival trait that helped us protect our young in a hostile world." Grax was pressed against his control console now, his superior size meaningless in the face of Elena's quiet menace. "What do you want?" "I want you to unlock every door in this facility," Elena said. "I want you to provide me with complete medical records for every child in your care. And I want you to kneel on the floor with your hands behind your head while I contact the authorities." "And if I refuse?" Elena's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made Grax's blood run cold. "Then I'll demonstrate why humans became the apex predators on one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds. And trust me, Grax, you really don't want that demonstration." Grax's resolve crumbled as he looked into those calm brown eyes and saw something that chilled him to his core. Not anger, not rage, but the cold certainty of a predator that had identified its prey. With shaking hands, he began entering commands into his control system. "All doors unlocked," he whispered. "Medical files transferred to your device, please." "Don't hurt me," Elena nodded approvingly. "Very good. Now kneel down and stay very still while I complete my mission." As Grax complied, Elena activated her emergency beacon. Within minutes, Galactic Council peacekeepers would be converging on the facility. The children would be rescued, the Syndicate's operation would be destroyed, and justice would finally be served. But more importantly, 43 young beings would go home to their families, their nightmare finally over. Elena smiled as she heard the first sounds of children's voices calling out in confusion and hope. For a human who had grown up on a world where protecting the innocent was a matter of survival, there was no sweeter sound in the galaxy. The universe had learned, once again, that appearances could be deceiving. The small, fragile-looking human was neither small nor fragile when it came to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves.